friends, and welcome to this month's Work Positive Culture Live experience. I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett, and I am delighted for you to join the Work Positive Culture community today as I coach you to grow culture, grow people, and grow profits. Be sure to stay until the end. Speaking of profits, when it's profitable for you to stay to the end, because I'm going to give you 2 free gifts just for watching to the end. Okay. This month, we are talking about the challenge of creating a work culture in which your team conceives the positive together. Now, conceiving the positive together is the social architecture of your work positive culture. Our resource for today is my newest bestseller, Align. That's ALIGN at Work. 5 practices that transform how your team collaborates. In that little book, I talk about Marcus, and I bet you can relate to Marcus. Marcus took over as regional operations director for 14 properties a little over a year ago. So his very first quarter, 3 of his strongest team members handed in their resignations. Gulp. His second quarter, 3 more left. Wow. Welcome to the company, Marcus. It was a Sunday evening, and Marcus's quarterly review approached. I think he was a little bit nervous. The numbers told him one story. The exit interview transcripts he had told him another. So here's Marcus sitting at his kitchen table. He's got a glass of his favorite bourbon, Buffalo Trace, and he's got a manila folder with all 6 exit interview transcripts inside of it. Don't you know he's really looking forward to reading those. Actually, he hadn't read any of them yet. HR had sent over to him the summary, and Marcus skimmed the summary. He filed it, moved on to the next operational fire. Now, having put out those fires, he had to read them. 5 of those 6 transcripts contained the same words. I felt invisible. Marcus stopped at the 4th transcript and went back into the kitchen over to his bar for some more Buffalo Trace. Came back, read the 5th one, same 3 words, I felt invisible. And he sat with that for a long time, and then he tried an exercise. There were 8 people on his team. He decided to sit down and name what each one of the 8 people left on his team. He sat down and decided to name what each one does best. You know how far he got? 3 of 8 after about 14 months as their people leader. That's all he had. So disgusted with himself, he got up, went to the back porch where he sat in the dark, and his teenage daughter, Jada, appeared in the door. She stood there for a minute watching him, and then she said, "Hey, Dad, about earlier, you don't really want my opinion. You just want me to agree with yours." And she slammed the door and went back upstairs to her room. Man, tough day to be Marcus, right? Yeah. He stared at the porch floor and thought. His daughter said the same thing as his exit interviews. The team told him, his daughter told him, how was he the last person to ever hear it? They all felt invisible. So the next morning, Marcus went to his generic AI platform and he asked this question: how do I fix high turnover? And what he found were some tactics. He found some templates, found some frameworks promising 6-week transformations. What he failed to find was exactly what you and I are going to discover today in this live experience. His team's challenge was a social architecture one. And the architect, Marcus, needed to transform himself first. Nicholas Christakis at Yale and James Fowler at UCSD have spent more than a decade documenting how our networks shape behavior. Their research is summarized in a great book I recommend to you, Connected, and it demonstrates that behaviors, emotions, and habits move through social networks in very measurable ways. In fact, the reach extends 3 degrees out. So think about that for just a second. Your friend influences you in ways neither of you notices. Let's hear Nicholas talk about this.
Maybe there's a kind of below the surface quiet riot that animates us all the time. Maybe there are emotional stampedes that ripple through human social networks. Maybe, in fact, emotions have a collective existence, not just an individual existence. And this is one of the first images we made to study this phenomenon. Again, a social network, but now we color the people yellow if they're happy and blue if they're sad, and green in between. And if you look at this image, you can right away see clusters of happy and unhappy people, again spreading to 3 degrees of separation. And you might form the intuition that the unhappy people occupy a different structural location within the network. So there's a middle and an edge to this network, and the unhappy people seem to be located at the edges. So to invoke another metaphor, if you imagine social networks as a kind of vast fabric of humanity, I'm connected to you and you to her, on out endlessly into the distance. This fabric is actually like an old-fashioned American quilt, and it has patches on it, happy and unhappy patches. And whether you become happy or not depends in part on whether you occupy a happy
Happy patch. Right, you gotta love that. Now, the implication for Marcus and for you and me from their research is direct. The behaviors you display, the emotions you carry, think of yourself as a patch, right? The habits you practice move through your team to candidates who are 2 networks away, candidates that are reading your job posting next month. So the team you lead is actually the team you attract. And the team you attract is the team you become. And the team you become walks home with you to your kitchen table, just like the one Marcus sat at. So the purpose of our time together in this live experience today is for you to cultivate the social architecture that transforms how your team collaborates so they work positive. You see, your best people may be like Marcus's best people. They feel invisible. So what happens is, say out of a team of 23 people and you're all in a meeting together, you might get 3 dissenting voices, but then there are 20 silent voices. Your retention numbers slip even as you work harder and harder and harder. But here's what I've learned, and the good news for today, from coaching executives, transforming cultures, and 4 decades of doing culture work. The people leaders, just like you, who transform their teams, transform their own social architecture first, and then the team responds in kind. So in this hour together, you're going to discover insights from my 40 plus years of experience and wisdom, plus the research of leading minds in psychology, network science, and organizational behavior. And you see the list of all these amazing people that we're going to refer to today. You're also going to follow Marcus on through his 10-month aligned journey from that Sunday night with the bourbon and the manila folder to a Sunday evening 8 months later when something magical happens at his kitchen table that he never saw coming. So ALIGN is the acronym for the framework we're talking about today. We're applying it to help you cultivate the social architecture that transforms your team. And remember, my friend, this begins with you. Here's what ALIGN stands for. The A is for attract your people. The L for lean. The I for invite cooperation, the G for govern your inner circle, and the N for nurture collaboration. So let's talk first about attract your people. The A in ALIGN is for attract your people. I don't know if you can see out the window here, the glare may get you. It's kind of a bright, sunshiny day here in Virginia where I'm sitting today. But out on our farm, my wife and I have lived on this little 22 acres of paradise for about 28 years now. Out here in front, we had 2 trees that grew side by side. One tree is a red oak. The other was a black walnut. Now, black walnut trees are rather unique in that they're very territorial. They literally release a chemical compound called juglone into the soil around their roots. And juglone is toxic to many, many plants. For instance, if you tried to plant tomatoes, which we're enjoying right now from our bushes, blueberries, which we just finished picking, azaleas, rhododendrons, any plant basically that you plant other than a black walnut under a black walnut, they die. They wither up and die due to the juglone. Now, the red oak out here, which still remains, yes, we took out the black walnut, does the opposite. Its leaves fall and they enrich the soil. Mushrooms grow up under it naturally. I love that all the songbirds nest in the branches. The squirrels store acorns, not particularly intrigued with squirrels, as you may have heard me talk about before. I prefer that the deer and turkeys eat the acorns. The whole ecosystem is the point. The whole ecosystem of our front yard organizes itself around the red oak. Now, understand it's the same yard, same sun, same amount of rainfall happening, but these two trees attract entirely different ecosystems rather, based on what they release. So let's think about your team as our front yard, as an ecosystem. The people who apply to work on your team, who accept your offer, who stay, the people who contribute, organize themselves around what you as the people leader release every single day. Tomas Chamorro Premusic is an organizational psychologist. He's chief talent scientist at Manpower Group. He's spent a couple of decades now studying who organizations actually attract to their team versus who they advertise themselves as wanting to attract to their teams. And his research has identified one consistent finding. The organizations who attract candidates who match the values they actually demonstrate are prominent. The ones who claim values in their job postings and fail to live them out have that disconnect and the revolving back door. In other words, a people leader who claims to value team input and actually moves at the speed of solo decisions attracts team members who are comfortable as spectators. Go do it yourself, boss. The team members who want to contribute pick up on that and they apply somewhere else. Let's hear Tomas describe this phenomenon in his own words.
If we look at the average job interview, it's an unstructured, improvised, short chat with someone where we almost wait to be seduced or impressed by factors that are so emotional and irrational that we don't need to question them. And we said, okay, great culture fit, love this candidate, very confident. Yeah, they really knew, and that's it. And by the way, even if we have 3 or 4 interviewers, usually the power dynamics are such that no one wants to disagree with the most senior person. So if the boss likes the candidate, everyone agrees. And then 6 months later, the boss is in charge of evaluating the candidate's performance. So of course it would look like it was a great choice. What it should be like, it should be much more structured, standardized. It should almost be a questionnaire or standardized survey. So de-emphasize anything that comes from short-term interactions, or what we actually, the definition of intuition that I like a lot is feelings about facts. No, we want facts. In God we trust, everyone else bring data.
I love that line. And in God we trust, everyone else but got to bring data. Okay, so the data is you attract who you are, not who you wish you were, not who you say you are. What you say, and this is his point there, what you say matters less than what you do. And what you do attracts people who match what you do. Marcus found this to be true. He was meeting with his coach, Helena, and she gave him 3 questions on the Wednesday after the Sunday night bourbon and transcripts night. She told him to answer each one of these questions in writing and then to ask his wife, Renee, the same questions about him. So the 3 questions were this: what are your core values? What are your work priorities? What is your unique contribution? So Marcus answered that first question about his core values in about 20 minutes. He cited his core values were collaboration, integrity, and excellence. And then he went to his wife, Renee, and asked her to answer. She said his core values, at least as she observed them from her perspective, were efficiency, control, and self-reliance. A little bit different than how Marcus saw himself. Okay, there was a huge gap between those 2 lists. So that got Marcus's attention, and he sat with those 2 lists for a long time. The list he claimed and the list he lived were like from 2 different worlds, right? So he took that reality into his next session with Helena, and she asked him a single question that riveted him. Which list does your team work for? The team Marcus attracted matched the list Marcus lived, the observed list from his wife Renee, rather than the list that he claimed. Boom. Talk about a gap analysis, right? So here's your attract do one thing challenge. Throughout the book Align at Work and throughout today, going to give you a challenge to do one thing, and we can all do one thing, right? So this week, write your 3 lists. Write your core values as you think you actually demonstrate them. Write your work priorities as your calendar actually shows them. And then write a list of your unique contribution as your team actually experiences it. Then find one person. For Marcus, it was his wife, Renee. Find one trusted person. Now, this person's got to be in close proximity with you, close enough to be intimate. They watch you closely, okay? And get them to write the same 3 lists about you. And do what Marcus did, compare those lists, and where the lists fail to match, that's where your magnet attracts the team you have rather than the team you want. And the gap between those 2 lists is your starting point. So if you'd like, you can drop in the comments there. Who's the trusted person that you'll ask? Who is the trusted person that you'll ask? And you can just drop their first name in the comments there. So that's how you best attract your people. And A in Align is for attract. Now let's move on to the L in Align, which is for lean on the team. My family and I lived in Western North Carolina before we moved here to Virginia. And there was a stand of pine trees that grew in our front yard. I mean, it was North Carolina, right? So pine trees everywhere, they grow like weeds. So there was this stand of pines that grew in our front yard. And the limbs of these trees were so close together. The limbs of these trees had grown together over the years. But there was one pine tree that grew alone. It was about, say, 20 feet or so from the others. And being Western North Carolina, it snowed a lot. And a snowfall arrived one night. It was heavy. It was wet snow. You know what I mean? Some snow's dry and powdery, others wet. So the ice and snow lay on the branches of every single one of the pines, and the weight bent the branches down toward the ground. Well, in the stand of pines, the branches from one tree rested on the trunk and branches of another, and none of those branches broke. They leaned on each other and mutually supported the weight. But the pine that grew 20 feet away, that grew alone, didn't fare so well. No other trees grew close enough for it to lean on, and its branches grew so heavy, they snapped. In fact, that single tree lost about half its branches and then uprooted under the weight, and we had to cut it up and remove the stump. So you are like those pine trees. You grow stronger, you work better as you lean on your team. I know they call you the boss, some of you, but they lean on you and you lean on them. Now, the need to lean on your team has only increased since the pandemic. But before the pandemic, which, by the way, the shutdown was over 6 years ago now, so we're coming out, should be recovering, right? But the need for this leaning has only gotten stronger over the last 6 years. In fact, Vivek Murthy served as the United States Surgeon General twice, and he devoted significant attention to a challenge that most of us as people leaders fail to name out loud. He had a 2023 advisory he titled, "Our Epidemic of," get this now, "Loneliness and Isolation." And in there, he documented the scope of his discovery, which is this: roughly half of American adults report significant loneliness. That makes the mortality risk associated with sustained loneliness greater than, it exceeds the mortality risk associated in this country with smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that soak in for a second. And that loneliness, half of all American adults, so half of everybody you work with, right? That loneliness fails to stay at home. In fact, it rides to work with your teammates. Let's listen to Vivek Murthy describe this in his own words. It's significant.
Right now in America, more than 50% of young people say that they're struggling with loneliness. About a third of adults say that they're struggling with loneliness. I actually think the numbers are somewhat higher. There tends to be some underreporting of this on surveys. And so what that means for us in the workplace actually is very important, because it's not just that loneliness impacts mental health and physical health and overall well-being. It actually impacts performance in the workplace. There's been some great research done by the late Sigal Barsaid, a professor at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, and others, who looked at loneliness in the workplace and found that when people struggle with disconnection in the workplace, when they don't have a colleague that they regard, as somebody they feel close to, that has a negative impact on their engagement, on their creativity, on their retention, and it also, it turns out, impacts their productivity. But the interesting thing about this is the effect is not isolated to them, right? Just like if you've ever had the experience of being in a group and somebody's having a really bad day and everyone knows it because their mood is just terrible, you know that that affects other people in the group too. So in a very interesting way, it turns out these effects of loneliness that you see impact the people around the person who's feeling socially disconnected.
Murthy goes on to argue that the loneliness crisis is actually, get this now, a leadership crisis. The people leader who creates connection at work delivers a public health intervention as much as a productivity initiative. That's very significant. Julianne Holt-Lundstad at BYU spent a couple of decades synthesizing research on this social connection we're talking about here and its relationship with survival. So her meta-analyses demonstrate that people with strong social relationship have a 50% greater likelihood of survival across follow-up periods than people with weak social relationships. That's a big number, 50%. That effect rivals or exceeds the mortality benefit of quitting smoking or exercising regularly or maintaining a healthy weight. Your team's social connection at work is a survival variable. The pine that grew alone snapped under the snow. The pine that leaned lasted. Now, this harkens back for me to the famous question from Gallup's engagement survey. Do you have a best friend at work? Same thing. Let's pick back up with Marcus. Marcus decided to phone a friend. He called Maya. Maya led a regional logistics team a few exits down the interstate from Marcus's facilities, and they had met at an industry breakfast a year earlier. Maya had cultivated her own work positive culture with the 5 lenses of the framework that we talked about last month. Marcus filed it away when she talked about it as something other people did. Yeah, well, now he's calling Maya. He tells her about the exit interviews. The 3 names out of 8 were all the ones that he could come up with, and his teenage daughter, Jada, and what she said in the porch doorway. Maya very kindly listened. Then she asked Marcus one question. Whose name on your team did you write down first when you tried to name what each person does best? Marcus thought for a second, and he said, Priya. And then Maya asked him, why Priya? Marcus said, because she handles every escalated tenant complaint in 3 of my 14 properties, and I have yet to lose a tenant she touched. So Maya sat silently for a moment. Then she said, Marcus, Priya is your pine grove. You just have yet to lean on her. So guess what Marcus did? He called Priya the next morning. He asked her 3 questions Maya had given him, and the conversation lasted, get this, 43 minutes. Priya named 2 operational fixes that would save Marcus's team approximately 6 hours a week. She named 1 tenant relationship that needed Marcus's escalation, and she named 1 team member whose talent Marcus had even failed to notice. So Marcus walked past 43 minutes of value every week for 14 months just because he refused to lean on his team. Pine groves stand sturdy because they do what? they lean on each other, they stand, and so do people leaders and their people. So here's your lean, do one thing challenge. I want you over the next week to ask one team member these 3 questions. You ready? What works well? What works well? What gets in the way? What do you see from where you sit that I miss from where I sit? So, what works well in your area that I failed to name out loud? What gets in your way that I could clear? And what do you see from where you sit that I miss from where I sit? Block out about 45 minutes. We're thinking 15 minutes apiece for these. Take good notes, listen all the way through. No real need to respond other than say thank you for your time. If you want to, drop in the comments which team member you're going to lean on this week. Just list their first name. Just make it a first name exercise. And look, go ahead. It's like popcorn popping. Just list the first one that pops into your head, okay? All right. It's that important to lean and to ask those questions, and you see what you're doing. Now you attract the best people to your team, the A in a line. You lean on the team, which is the L in a line. Now let's invite cooperation among the team members. Invite cooperation is the I in a line. Let me tell you a story about our older daughter. She was about 2 years old. Both of our daughters are grown adults now, but I still remember this moment with our older daughter. She was about 2. I think every 2-year-old is strong-willed, so it's redundant to call a 2-year-old strong-willed, but this one was particularly independent, shall we say. One of her favorite phrases was, "I do it, Daddy. I do it, Daddy." Then she would try to do something like open the door, even though she could hardly reach the doorknob and the door weighed more than she did. Sometimes whatever she was trying to do, she couldn't do it, but still, and I love this about her even today, she persevered. She kept trying and trying and trying until she became so frustrated that her words came out slightly off. She went to ask me for help, and she would say, instead of "help me, Daddy," she would say, "Hope me, Daddy, hope me." And I would say, "Okay, I'll hope you. Let's pull on the door together." And I'd put my big hand on her little hand, and we'd turn the doorknob and then pull it together. And together we would do what she failed to do alone. Now, look, you're going to try to do something probably today, certainly this week, that you think you can do on your own. I do it, you'll say. That's when this practice of invite cooperation, collaboration, that's when this practice of the I in a line invites you to ask for cooperation from your team members, and your team members are ready to help. And understand that when you ask for help, you're bringing them hope as you do. Wayne Baker at the University of Michigan, go Blue, Ross School of Business, says in his book, all you have to do is ask, that the number one reason people fail to receive help at work is they have yet to ask for help at work. Help is available, colleagues are willing, but the request goes unspoken. Heidi Grant is a social psychologist. She's also the author of a wonderful book, Reinforcements. Let's listen to Heidi from her TEDx Atlanta talk when she discovered why we fail to ask for help. Here's Heidi.
So if you need help, you're going to have to ask for it. And by the way, even when someone can tell that you need help, how do they know that you want it? Did you ever try to give unsolicited help to someone who it turns out did not actually want your help in the first place? They get nasty real quick, don't they? Actually, research shows that 90% of the help that coworkers give one another in the workplace is in response to explicit requests for help. So you're gonna have to say the words, "I need your help," right? There's no getting.
What keeps us from saying "I need your help"? Well, Heidi has identified 4 specific obstacles that prevent us as people leaders from asking for help. Number 1 is the fear of looking incompetent. After all, we are the people leader, we're the boss, right? The fear of imposing, I don't want to stop their work. The fear of feeling indebted. If I do something for them, they help me, then I got to help them later. And this may be the biggest one for us as people leaders, because we got to where we are for a reason, right? The fear of giving up control, which means we can no longer secure the outcomes that we want. Now, each of those four obstacles are indeed fears. Each one is an obstacle that feels personal. And yet I want you to know today, it's universal. Each obstacle is universal. You as a people leader, when you refuse to ask, you're carrying the operational load alone. You are running out of capacity. I bet you've already run out of capacity if you've been doing this more than a few months. You're feeling burnout, even betrayed. Some of us, it's not actually betrayal, but you do feel burned out. You're watching your team take a step back and disengage because they don't have a purchase point on the work. Where do they get involved? But the people leader who asks those four words, I need your help, that people leader is the one who demonstrates trust, contribution, completion, security. That single sentence, I need your help, communicates all that. And that people leader who says, I need your help, gives hope to the team that they're important and that they matter to the work. Your work is significant. That's what you're saying. So asking, I need your help, is leadership. Failing to ask is depending just on your performance. So what did Marcus do in inviting cooperation? Well, remember now, Marcus's quarterly review is coming up, and remember his numbers were soft, or you could just say they sucked. Remember, first quarter, 3 people walked out. Second quarter, 3 people walked out, which means his financials weren't looking good either on those 14 properties. So Helena, his coach, asked him a question in their session. Who on your team, Marcus, has insight into these operational gaps that are showing up in numbers? And who on your team have you yet to ask for help? Marcus immediately listed 3 people. No, he hadn't asked them. What's keeping you from doing it? And Marcus said, to his benefit, he was honest with Helena, they'll know I don't have it all figured out, and they'll think I shouldn't be their leader. And the truth is, some days I don't think I should be their leader either. So Marcus and Helena sat silent for a minute, and then she asked him this insightful question. Great, powerful coaching question. Marcus, what would you tell a member of your team who is sitting where you're sitting right now? Marcus knew the answer immediately. I'd tell them to ask for help. So Marcus did just that. He called a meeting with 3 people on his list. He told them the truth. The numbers were soft. He'd failed to involve them. He needed their help to construct the real story for his boss. So these 3 team members began to name operational gaps that Marcus had yet to see, fixes that he had yet to consider, and one strategic shift that he wound up sharing with his boss, and his boss endorsed immediately in the quarterly review. See, friend, the simplest invitation to cooperation is just 4 words. I need your help. See how easy that is? Marcus said those 4 words 6 times in his meeting. Then he said them 3 times the next day to Renee as she sat with him, his wife, at the kitchen table. He even said them once to his teenage daughter, Jada, at the dinner table on Sunday. Jada looked up, shocked, of course. What do you need my help with? I mean, she was 14. Marcus had failed, well, he could remember back over 3 years that he had failed to ask her help. It may have been longer. But you see, those 4 words, I need your help, were already working. So let's encourage you to use these 4 words. Here's your invite, do one thing challenge. This week, identify one task or one decision that you've been carrying all by yourself as a people leader that you suspect a team member could help you carry better. Find that person, talk to that person, and use these 4 words. I need your help. Can you say them with me? I need your help. Then ask, listen, accept what that person offers. So what is the task you've been carrying alone? If you want to name it quickly over in the comments, that would be great. And look, we're all carrying some task alone. We all can invite cooperation better. So don't let those 4 obstacles, those 4 fears get in your way of talking to that person, okay? Just push through. Try it with one person. I need your help, and see what happens. I promise the results will be absolutely remarkable. So now you attract the A in a line, the team that you really want. You lean on the team, the L in a line. You invite cooperation, the I in a line. Now, this one is very strategic and very important. I mean, they are all important, but this one, think of it as a linchpin in creating the kind of team that you want. G is for govern your inner circle, the G in a line. You remember Eeyore from A.A. Milne's 100 Acre Wood, Christopher Robin, Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, T.I.W.G.R. Well, they would suggest they'd have a team meeting, the 4 of them, and there'd be some positive play day pursuit they were planning for Christopher Robin. And do you remember how Eeyore would always respond? It'll never work. That's what Eeyore said every time. Hey, I bet you know an Eeyore at your work, don't you? Don't put their name in the comments, okay? Don't say it out loud, because somebody might be overhearing you, right? If you're in a cubicle. Eeyore is that colleague who responds to every new initiative suggesting a team meeting with 3 reasons it'll fail. Or Eeyore is a team member who arrives at every meeting with a story about how the last person who tried to do this got burned. Eeyore is the peer who pulls you aside in the hallway to tell you what's really going on around here. And ironically, what's really going on is always negative, right? I call them more than Eeyores, though. I call them Eeyore vampires. And here's the reason why. They're Eeyores by day at work, but when the sun sets in the evenings, these Eeyores fly around your sleep and keep you from sleeping. You're either waking up at 3 a.m. or you're having trouble going to sleep at 11 p.m., right? That zaps your energy for the next work day. And they are constantly in the back of your head, back here in what I call the cave person brain, the limbic system. They are circling your thoughts, and they are sucking your lifeblood, your time, your energy, and your attention. And the cost is real for having these Eeyore vampires on your team. In fact, Robert Sutton at Stanford's Graduate School of Business has spent a couple of decades documenting the cost of Eeyore vampires to the cultures that they inhabit. Now, Robert Sutton's not quite as generous as me. I call them Eeyore vampires. He calls them assholes. And he wrote a book called The No Asshole Rule. And he identifies, remember, he documented the cost. A single chronically negative person inside of a team imposes a measurable productivity task on every other team member. And Sutton calculated the cost in a case study at over $160,000 of lost productivity and turnover from a single team member over a 2-year period. That means that Eeyore vampire is costing you as a people leader $80,000 a year. Now, what could you do with $80,000 a year, right? I mean, find something to do with it, right? Go right to the bottom line, show more profit, if nothing else. Christine Parith at Georgetown University quantifies also what happens to a team exposed to what she refers to as chronic small unkindnesses. Now, that's a new word for me, unkindnesses, but anyway, chronic small unkindnesses. So workers experiencing, Sutton calls them assholes, I call them Eeyore vampires, she calls them rude colleagues, showed a 38% decrease in work quality. You heard that right. A 30% decrease in creativity and a 47% decrease in time spent on actual work. That's almost half of your workday is not even spent on actual work, and it's all because of what she calls chronic small unkindnesses. Let's listen to Christine describe it in her own words.
And what we found is that incivility made people less motivated. 66% cut back work efforts, 80% lost time worrying about what happened, and 12% left their job. Incivility is a bug. It's contagious, and we become carriers of it just by being around it. And this isn't confined to the workplace. We can catch this virus anywhere, at home, online, in schools, and in our communities. It affects our emotions, our motivation, our performance, and how we treat others. It even affects our attention and can take some of our brain power.
I like the way she refers to those chronic small unkindnesses as incivility. Just really describes how Eeyore vampires' negative energy work, right? And you hear her saying clearly it transfers to every single contact your team makes for the rest of the day. It has an effect. It's demonstrated. You've got the numbers now on it. The way I like to think about what we need to do with Eeyore vampires came to me one afternoon while I was working out here on the farm. We've got fencing for the horse pastures. And I was clearing brush along one of those fence lines one afternoon, and I noticed a maple sapling growing right up under the fence line. Now, I grew up in eastern North Carolina where they're mostly pine trees. They're green all year long. Frankly, it gets to be boring after a while, but a maple tree blazes orange in the fall, particularly when the sunlight hits it just right. So I'm a fan of maples and oaks. I decided to go get my shovel, my sharpshooter shovel, and dig up that maple tree sapling and transfer it to another part of our farm where it could grow better because it was right, like I said, right there up under the fence. I went and got the shovel, and I came back, and I noticed something growing right beside the maple sapling. Guess what it was? Poison ivy. Have you ever had poison ivy? You don't want it, trust me. Especially if you're doing things like live streams or speaking on a stage in front of 1,200 people like I do. You have to scratch in places that just shouldn't be scratched in public, okay? My point is this, though. You don't want poison ivy. You do want maple trees, but yet they were growing side by side in the same soil. The dirt fails to care which one of those takes root. It just nourishes whatever it receives. Your team's culture is just like that soil. It fails to distinguish between maple trees and poison ivy. Poison ivy grows right alongside the maple trees in every single team. The work positive people leader, the one that you want to be, recognizes the poison ivy and refuses to nourish it. That recognition is what we call governance. So the refusal to endure or to encourage or even to engage with poison ivy, Eeyore vampires, incivil people, assholes, whatever you want to call them, the refusal is governance. The transplant of the maple away from the poison ivy is also governance. Let me tell you how Marcus governed. He identified 2 Eeyore vampires on his team. One was a peer named Dale. Dale was a regional director for a parallel operations group. Dale made a habit, and Marcus was complicit in the conspiracy because he allowed it, to call Marcus every Friday afternoon at 4:30 with one agenda item. He was downloading grievances. He complained about their bosses. He would tell Marcus all the gossip, like which colleagues were on the way out. So that was an external. The other Eeyore vampire was an internal. This was a team member named Greg that Marcus supervised and led. Greg began every one of their team meetings with a comment about how the proposed approach had failed last time. So Marcus, with Helena's help as his coach, decided to approach the internal and external in 2 different ways. First, Dale required a boundary. Marcus told Dale kindly and clearly that he had moved his Friday afternoon to a focus block and would no longer take his calls then, but instead he suggested they grab lunch monthly. And those lunches lasted 90 minutes once a month rather than 45 minutes once a week. See how that governance worked, that boundary? Greg, though, being internal to Marcus's team required a different strategy. Greg's negativity, it turns out, was actually an intelligent person's defense mechanism rather than some kind of character flaw like Dale had. So Marcus pulled Greg into a one-to-one and asked Greg directly, what would you need to feel safe trying something that might fail? Insightful, powerful question, right? Greg's answer, frankly, surprised Marcus. Greg just needed permission. He just needed Marcus to say out loud that an attempt that failed honorably was as valuable as an attempt that succeeded easily. Wow. Amazing what you can discover when you talk to people. Govern your inner circle means you decide who gets what level of access to your bandwidth and to your team's emotional environment. Then you act to set boundaries and you reinforce that decision. Now, there are some of your vampires that require boundaries, others that require coaching. Some require an exit stage left opportunity. You hear what I'm saying? It's your role as the people leader to make the calls that support the best governing of your inner circle, external and internal. So here's your govern, do one thing challenge. This week, name at least one your vampire. I'd encourage you to think about them like Marcus discovered his and name your two biggest your vampires. One inside your team and one outside your team. And then as you think about them, identify one specific access shift that you can make. Like Marcus, maybe a standing meeting that gets shortened or a recurring call that gets relocated. That negative voice that gets the one-to-one conversation about what would help them try and what they could do differently, and make that shift for each one of them. And I want you to observe what comes back to your bandwidth. And here we're talking about time, we're talking about your emotional energy, the team's time, productivity. You just heard the numbers there and what they're sucking out of your team and out of you. I would ask you to name your vampire over in the comments, but I'm afraid some of you actually would, and you wouldn't use their first name. I've asked for people to name their ER vampires silently to themselves when I'm in front of a live audience in person. And some people still scream them out. So just don't put a name there because that person hopefully is on this call with you, right? All right. So align. The A is for attract. The L is for lean. The I is for invite cooperation. The G is for govern your inner circle. Now let's round the corner and head for home here with the N in align, which is nurture collaboration. Let me tell you a quick story about two groups of golfers who participated in an experiment. Each group played a round of golf and each round was videotaped, okay? So the first group watched a video of their best shots, the longest drives, most accurate iron shots, their one putts. And the instructor, the golf coach, praised the golfers and told them, go out there and play like this again. So the golfers did. They, in fact, improved their scores. Now, the second group of golfers watched video of their worst shots. And the instructor said to them, people, is this any way to play golf? Now go out there and fix those shots. So they went out there and guess what? They played worse than they did before. So which group of golfers do you want to belong to? Well, the first group, of course. The first group worked with an instructor who collaborated. She videotaped the best shots. She named what worked. She trusted the golfers to repeat what they'd already done well. That partnership is a collaboration that gets nurtured. Cooperation is two people working alongside each other in the same task. Collaboration is two people creating something neither could conceive alone. There's a difference. Collaboration is the next level. Adam Grant at the Wharton School at UPenn has spent more than a decade studying the difference between people who give freely at work, people who take freely at work, and people who match. His research is summarized in a great book I highly recommend to you, Give and Take. He identified a finding that surprised even him. Let's listen to Adam describe that finding in his own words.
Takers are self-serving in their interactions. It's all about what can you do for me? The opposite is a giver. It's somebody who approaches most interactions by asking, what can I do for you? And I found that most people are right in the middle between giving and taking. They choose this third style called matching. If you're a matcher, you try to keep an even balance of give and take, quid pro quo. I'll do something for you if you do something for me. And that seems like a safe way to live your life. But is it the most effective and productive way to live your life? The answer to that question is a very definitive maybe. The worst performers in each of these jobs were the givers. So givers spend a lot of time trying to help other people and improve the team, and then unfortunately they suffer along the way. And I want to talk about what it takes to build cultures where givers actually get to succeed. So I wondered then, if givers are the worst performers, who are the best performers? And let me start with the good news. It's not the takers. Takers tend to rise quickly, but also fall quickly in most jobs. And they fall at the hands of matchers. If you're a matcher, you believe in an eye for an eye, a just world. Most people are matchers, and that means if you're a taker, it tends to catch up with you eventually. What goes around will come around. And so the logical conclusion is it must be the matchers who are the best performers. But they're not. In every job, in every organization I've ever studied, the best results belong to the givers again.
Wow. Takers are self-serving. The givers turned out to be the best performers. Marcus discovered this to be true. Remember, it was his 10th month of working on his Align. He had 3 transformations that were visible to everyone on his team. He named a specific contribution from a different person at every Monday meeting, and the names rotated. The team learned the entire week began with a true acknowledgement of them. He co-owned projects with team members rather than just assigned them projects. He instituted a quarterly practice he called 3 wins, where every member of his team named 1 operational win, 1 team win, and 1 personal win. And the personal wins really surprised him at first, but people remembered those personal wins 6 months later. So 8 months after the bourbon and transcripts night, Priya was offered a promotion by a competing firm, and she turned it down. Now, remember, Marcus is the guy that started his first 2 quarters with 6 people leaving. Priya sent Marcus a note telling him about the offer and said, I see myself here. So 3 words became 4 words. Instead of I felt invisible, I see myself here. Now, the real magic, because culture coaching at work goes home with all of us. The real magic for Marcus came as he sat at the table with his wife, Renee, working through a college decision that Jada had faced on another Sunday evening. That was 8 months after he had started to Align. 2 universities that offered Jada admission, both that offered aid packages within $500 of each other. So Renee, being mom, made a list of pros and cons. Marcus said instead, let's ask Jada what she's thinking. So Marcus called Jada to the kitchen, and he did something previously very unusual for him. He asked Jada's opinion. And she talked, and her reasoning was clear. And when she finished, Marcus said, I think you've thought this through better than I've thought through most decisions I've made this year. Jada, we're going to trust you to make the call that's best for you. Jada's eyes filled with tears. Marcus's did also. Renee just out and out sobbed, and they hugged one another as few families with teenagers do. Jada left the kitchen and texted her best friend on the way upstairs. Dad listened. He really listened. Renee reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hands and said, welcome back, honey. It's so good to see you again. Man. See, that's an unexpected reality. The people leader you cultivate at work goes home with you. Your Nurture Do One Thing challenge for today. Identify one project on your plate that you currently own alone, and just choose a team member to own it with you, to be your co-owner. And just live out of that co-ownership for 21 days and see what it is that happens. You really do attract who you are. So think about the project that you can co-own with one of your team members. If you want to drop it in the comments, that's great. So now you know how to align your team. The A is for attract your people. The L is for lean on the team. The I is for invite. That breaks that barrier of leadership for you, right? Solo leadership. G is for govern. That protects that one piece of the team bandwidth, right? Nurture compounds. So which one of these are you doing well with? The A, the L, the I, the G, or the N? Drop that letter over in the comments section. And which one do you need the most work on? Just drop that over there. I just want you to know you're not alone. We all have work to do on aligning our teams. Also, if you want to go over to your comments and drop a question in for me, I'll be glad to take in the minutes we have remaining. I'll be glad to take those for you. While you're putting your comments in there and thinking about the aligned framework and what you do well and what you can improve on, let me tell you, we've got a special offer for you today. If you're watching this live, congratulations. Thanks for tuning in live. We really appreciate that. Align at Work, 5 Practices that Transform How Your Team Collaborates is absolutely free as a Kindle book on Amazon today. Here is the link. You'll see that in the comments. So you can click on that and go and get your free Kindle copy. If you're watching this after the 19th of August, 2026, when we're recording this, that's great too. Just go on LinkedIn, send me a message. If you need to connect with me first, that's great. I see all of your questions and answers and requests, and I reply to them all. Just send me a DM on LinkedIn and say, hey, Dr. Joey, can I get a free copy? And we'll send you a PDF copy of Align at Work, and you can drop that in your Kindle then. Okay? All right. So let's see. You see the links there. Annalisa, I don't see any questions here, so we must have done a great job of anticipating all of those. Thank you so very much for being here with us today. If you were here live, we so appreciate you and your contribution to this time together. If you're watching the recording, thanks. Reach out to me. Love to help you create a work positive culture. One of the ways we do that is by inviting you to go to workpositive.today, and we have a free work positive culture assessment for you there. So thanks so much for tuning in today. We appreciate you. Thanks for watching, and you take care. Let's go work positive as we align our teams. Okay.